ULLCITY. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me today I have Mike. How are you, Mike?
I'm good. I'd love to come on another episode after a win, and I'm hoping that happens soon. But yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Look, it is a tough one. 5 losses in a row. I think we were talking during the week about when the last time would have been that we'd lost 5 in a row. No doubt it was probably that 2019-2020 season with the COVID relegation. So it's been a little while since we've seen such a poor run of form. But, you know, on the positive side, we scored a goal, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, happy with that and happy to see Burstow get off the mark.
Yeah, really positive from him to get off the mark. Kamara with the assist as well. It was interesting. I mean, talking about the game, McLaughlin coming in for Hughes, who was suspended. We weren't really sure if he was suspended for the 5 yellows or not. And Omer coming in for Longman. I think we sort of thought that there'd be more change to the shape, more change to the personnel potentially. For example, seeing Kamara still out on the left-hand side where he did deliver the great ball for the Burstow goal. But I mean, we sort of talked before the match, but what was your take on, I guess, the lineup and you know, Dawson potentially sort of playing it safe a little bit with the personnel?
Yeah, I think I said this in the chat. I wanted more of a change, but I think Brad was the one that commented saying you almost don't want to come in and change everything in the first game. And I get that approach. I think Dawson's still trying to understand what an 11 would look like under him. I think bringing in Palmer for me was a big one. You know, he's shown glimpses of being a great player. I just don't think he's gotten the chance. But I think the changes that were made were pretty good.
Yeah, and in terms of the tactics, I mean, like, it's a really tough one because for me, the first 5, 10, even 15 minutes, I actually thought it was a really positive display. I saw, you know, Slater, I saw Palmer, I saw Omer even, all looking much more, and Kamara as well, looking much more intent on getting forward, beating a man, you know, driving forwards, whereas, you know, clearly under Volta, it felt much slower. It was much more safety first, pass back, pass around with the keeper. That obviously sort of tailed off as Barak grew into the game. And so we can't, I don't know, it's hard to expect, you know, a huge change overnight, but I thought what we saw was quite a positive.
I agree. I think the biggest change, and I don't have the numbers for it, and I'd be really curious, is how much time Panda actually spent on the ball. Because I think that was a talking point for majority of, I guess, the 18 games that Walter was in charge of, right? Was just how much time Panda, Jones, and Hughes had on the ball. I think even under Rosie, we primarily saw Macca, Greaves, and Jones with the ball, but looking to make that next pass and passing forward. And I think there were glimpses of that at the beginning of the game. So it almost, and I think you're the one that also commented during the game that it almost felt like it was Rosie football again, where, you know, we've got our centre backs on the ball, but they're looking up and they're looking for what that next pass is going to be. And then our wingers started taking on the defence. And I felt like they played with a bit more positivity, not necessarily more risk, but just more positivity. And I don't know if that's a reaction to Dawson being in charge and you know, the connection that he's got to the club and probably the connection that he's had to the players. But it did seem like, for me, the biggest change was, let's not just pass back and give it to Panda. Let's actually look for the next ball. I think our players started making a lot more runs during the game. You know, Simon's had a really good game as well.
Yeah. I guess on the negative side, I thought it's been talked about a bit, but, you know, Drame was
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because I feel like Doak is a really good player, and he does feel a bit like, you know, he's, you know, this season's Harry Wilson or whoever you want to use as the comparative of young player first loan, but just clearly almost too good for this level, where putting him up against the natural right back, playing at left back, it's obviously partly Drame just having a really poor game and the mentality to not really fight and try and, you know, compete and come back and have some sort of positive impact. He did sort of drop his head, I think, a bit, but also partly I think Doak, just being a quality player, does sort of just highlight the fact that Drame was playing out of position. But what I was really interested in was Dawson not taking him off at halftime. I thought that was potentially a mistake.
Yeah, look, I'm going to criticize him, but at the same time, I'm going to say players have bad games, and having a bad game and being up against Doak, or as our commentator really liked to put it, Doak,
Yeah.
really, it just compounds it, right? So I think if he weren't put up against Doak, we still would have noticed that he had not a great game, but it wouldn't have been as exploited. Whereas Doak's just taken advantage, and that's what a player of his ability is going to do. I've got a feeling that Dawes was very much at halftime like, hey, just shake it off. You know, it's a second half, it's a new half, just go out, give it your all. And I think 10 minutes in, I don't know if it was the first half or the second half, where he's just kind of let the ball run under his foot.
Yeah, I think it was first half, maybe for the second goal.
Yeah, it might have been.
He took like a swing at it for try
to. Yeah, and then he's just not gone back, right? Dawes I think he's recognized the first half. He's given him another 10 minutes in the second half, and then he said, okay, I'm going to make a change. And he brought Giles on. I thought Giles had a pretty decent second half, and we've barely seen him, so I don't know if that's another situation of Walter not necessarily liking Giles or getting along with him. But I'm hoping we see more of Giles. I'm hoping we see more of Jacob as well at some point. Playing a left-footed left back to me makes sense.
I think I can't remember who was the one that made the point, which I thought was a valid one, which was playing Drame at left back whilst you've got Kamara being the left-footed winger makes a bit of sense, because you've kind of got that coverage. You're sort of compensating for each other. Whereas I guess if you had a left-footed left back and a left-footed left winger, I don't know, maybe it sort of unbalances it a bit. I don't. That was sort of how it was put to me. I went, I guess it sort of makes sense, but
I guess it makes sense, but that's also then putting a lot of assumption on Kamara to consistently check back, which he did in the game, but I don't think he's going to do it every single time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know you've got a point on body language as well in terms of Kamara, but I thought Giles last season under a senior looked really positive, looked really happy to be here.
Yeah.
Didn't have the output necessarily, but looked like he was really up for it. Whereas this season, and I agree, I thought he actually had a pretty decent game in Borough, but I was interested, his body language whenever there was a mishit pass or he wasn't played in, or even sometimes he would be the one mishitting the pass, and he'd be getting frustrated that another player wouldn't run onto it, and he'd be throwing his arms in the air. And it was just interesting seeing that sort of body language where maybe it's a product of the fact that he wanted that move to Borough in the summer and it didn't eventuate, and he's just sort of almost mentally checked out. But it'll be really interesting to see when the new manager comes in, how they handle Giles, and either if he just gets a fresh slate or if it's just basically, okay, well, I'm not going to play you and you're out the door in January.
Yeah, see, I'm hoping it's not the latter, because I actually think he's a decent player, and I think we were really excited when he first came to the club. I'm hoping it's residual from Walter, and Dawes is going to give him the love that he needs. I think Dawes is probably very good with kind of player empathy. Having spent so long at the club and having spent so long as a player, I think that's probably a skill that I don't know Walter had. I mean, we've all seen some articles coming out of players around and talking about what it was like to be at the club with Walter, and we've seen Burstow come out, we've seen Palmer come out, so I'm wondering if Giles is a similar case. Hopefully the more he gets played. Look, you can't fault the club, you can't fault them for being frustrated, right? 5 games without a win, 5 games lost in a row, 10 games without a win. Like, it's frustrating, and I'm sure that as supporters, we don't necessarily make it really easy on them. I think we're always expecting them to at least be competitive, right? And I just feel like we haven't been. So I get the frustration. I'd probably hide the body language. I mean, you mentioned Kamara, right? And I mentioned to you before the pod, he's had a great assist to Burstow to get us back into the game, and he hasn't celebrated. He's just turned around, put his head down, and walked away. Like, hasn't even gone over to Burstow, who just scored his first goal, right? And it's small things like that make me a bit worried around, what's the dressing room feel like at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that a new manager or Dawson can make that change.
It was interesting, I think, because I think it was Volta who said that he actually liked having cliques in the dressing room where you'd have different groupings kind of bonded or close, where you might have, I don't know, you'd have Drame and Kamara being close because they're playing in a similar position. And on one level, it made sort of sense because you're going, okay, well, you want to have a good connection with players that you're quite close to on the field. But on another level, I'm like, you don't want clicks at a club. You don't want players sort of isolated or, separated from other players. You want to have like an all-in philosophy, all-in mentality with the squad, so that you don't have, like you said, you don't have, Giles throwing his hands up or Kamara not recognizing, how significant it was for Burstow to get that goal. So you're right. Like, hopefully Dawson and hopefully whoever's coming in can sort of break down those barriers and really sort of rebuild that atmosphere and that mentality around the squad that we had last season. Other big talking point was the non-red card at 0-0 on Pedro, which I just can't really fathom. And I think, if ever there was an argument for VAR to actually have, do something for the good of the game, it's these sorts of very clear cut, there's a tug on the shirt, it's continued on over a number of steps. So it's not just, a negligible tug of the shirt. It's a strong pull. Would it be the force to bring him down? Probably not. But, that's as a player, that's the only way you're going to highlight the foul being committed. He's through on goal. It's a goal scoring opportunity. It should be a straight red card. Yeah,
there's nothing else to say. It was. Yeah. I thought it was clear as day. I think that changes the entire game as well. And it was one of those moments where it just felt like nothing was going our way. Like nothing has been for the last however many games, and it basically just summed it up.
Yeah, and I think and to be fair, I mean, if we're being a bit critical, I think the players definitely started to lose their heads a bit after that as well. I think as supporters, it's right to get frustrated and to get quite angry at something like that. But as a player, you do need to some extent shake that off, and it should be on, Louis, Slater maybe. Like I'm just thinking like this Jones, like the senior players on the field, to be telling everyone, hey, it's been done. There's nothing we can do about it. Get on with it. Because in fact, was it Jones or was it Slater? One of them was actually involved they copped a yellow card for a very similar offence the other way, where you just go, just get on with it. And really that first goal came about because you could just see the players had lost their heads to a large extent. And it's frustrating. And like you said, it feels like all these refereeing decisions are going against us. And at the end of the day, you make your own luck and you just have to put the referee out of your head and get on with it. But, 1-0 became 2-0 and you sort of thought, okay, it's going to be a cricket score here. And so Burstow scoring to get back into it was actually really positive. And to be fair, at 2-1, we looked every bit of chance to actually score a second and really get back into it.
Yeah, I think it was Coyle that got the yellow. But I think
which is even more sort of like, as the captain, you're like, no, mate, you got to actually, and that's sort of what's going to contribute to the players losing their heads if the captain's losing his head.
I'm hoping Dawson at halftime helped them shake it off. But you're right. Look, we look good. We looked like we were going to score, or at least, it was nice to get some shots off, and it was nice to get that goal. But yeah, it's just disappointing. I think, that was the closest we'd been in a while to looking decent. And look, given that, they're a great team, right? I don't think I went into that expecting a win. But I'm happy with the way we performed.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think there's been a lot of discussion around the performance in the sense that, well, it's another loss. Well, we're still, heads dropping when we're 2-0 down or whatever it might be. And I think you can't, like I said before, you can't expect change overnight. I think to see the desire and the energy from the players early in the game, to see the goal, to see us at least pushing for an equaliser at that point of the game, was all the sort of positives that you could hope for out of the game. It's going to be a really fascinating 11 against Blackburn this weekend, which we'll talk about in a second. But, with Burstow scoring the goal, whether he does come into consideration. Pedro, I didn't think had a poor game, but he feels like he's like a 30-minute burst player, not someone that you play from the. I thought it was a fitness thing, but I think now it's just he's not even that old. He's like 31 or something, but I
just don't know. I don't know what he adds.
Yeah. He's a clinical finisher. Like that's what he adds, but it's just getting him in those positions. Well, I thought that both of his goals I thought have been really well taken. Sort of fox in the box. Like he's almost like a slow Jamie Vardy, if that's the right comparison. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
interesting. I also just don't know because I think
He's a worse Oscar.
Yeah, it's fair. I thought we could play Burstow up front, but I think you're the one that
Yeah.
commented saying he's had his better games out wide. But I would still give him a shot up front, or at least start like Bedia.
Yeah, whether you start Bedia and you have Burstow on the right, or you just you play two up top or something. I can't remember where I saw some comment about the fact that Burstow's lighter frame. It was funny actually because I think it was Burstow in the comments you were referring to where he'd sort of push back on Volta playing him out wide because he thought he should be playing up top. But and look, and he's tall. He's good. He's got a good header on him. So maybe he can make that striker position his own. But I just don't know if he's going to get pushed around by strikers a bit by centre backs too much.
I'd give him a go.
Yeah. Nothing to lose really at this point. Well, maybe a little bit.
Bring Stellis Fleming in. Put him up front.
Yeah. What were your votes for this game?
I thought Palmer had a really good game. I put Burstow as second, and then I put Simmons as third.
Yeah, nice one. I've got the same top two. I went Palmer for the 3. We haven't really touched on. I thought particularly when we were looking dominant. Well, we were in the game at the start for the first 15 or so minutes. His ball control, like there was a few times that he was almost pushed off the ball, but was able to retain it and sort of burst through the challenge and open up a whole lot of space, which I think we've been crying out for that use of the central midfield a whole lot more, where you actually do get a whole lot of space and ability to open the game up. So I thought he was terrific in that sense. Burstow for getting his goal, and then I went Kamara for the one for the assist, and I thought especially early his intent to get forward, which we haven't seen as much. I think like his sprinting was actually really good because I feel like a lot of the time, I think you made the comparison to Philogene, he can be quite laconic in terms of like he'll pick the ball up, turn back, or he'll stand on the ball, look to beat the man that way. Whereas he does actually have a decent amount of pace to him that if he can actually and the way that he got that assist was basically just bursting past the defender. So I thought that was good as well.
Yep.
Onto the manager search then. So there's been a lot of names thrown up, and actually in the last 24 hours or so, I think Özcan's done a few interviews saying that he's interviewed 6 managers, which I thought was interesting because then when you think about that, the fact that we haven't seen reported, and it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, but the fact that it hasn't been reported that we've got permission from any clubs to speak to managers would suggest it's someone out of work, or the managers that we've interviewed have been managers out of work. So
yeah.
I think Eustace and Sellers had both been linked as managers currently in a job, which I think sort of rules them out. I think Jukanovic emerged early last week. It should have been, I guess, early this week, actually. So it would have been Sunday or Monday as the early favourite. So he, of course, got promotion with Watford and Fulham. Didn't do so well with Sheffield United, but at least has that pedigree of promotions out of the league, if that's sort of, and he plays a very attractive brand of football as well.
Yeah.
And Chris Hughton, sort of down the other end of the spectrum, I think he's high in the betting odds, which doesn't always mean anything. Yeah. But he, if people were bored stiff by Rossinia's football, I don't think Hughton's going to do much to improve on that. So it's a really curious one. I think the intention is to have someone in before Blackburn. So I guess the broader question is, it's interesting, June kind of going from the take it slow, do it properly, interview all the relevant candidates, to thinking I need someone in before Blackburn. Like how what's your sense in that, and who would you like to see put in charge?
I don't know if an appointment before Blackburn makes sense. I don't think it's enough time with the players or with I think you'd still at least give Dawson the game, even if you do bring someone in. It would be more like, okay, we've gotten a manager, give Dawson another game of the weekend, and then he can work with the team for the entirety of the week. I'm not sure if we have a midweek game next week though.
I think we do on the Thursday. Okay,
it still gives 4 days, right, with the team, rather than now. If we were to appoint someone tomorrow, it's 2 days. So Jukanovic is probably my best bet. I think everyone's been screaming about attacking football. I think it was at Fulham, or when he was at Watford, I think they scored 91 goals in the season. So he's got a proven track record of playing attacking football and, like you said, attractive football. And I think, as weird as it sounds, I don't care if we don't win. I just think we need something to energize the fans and bring them back to the games. Sure, winning would be amazing, and we have to make sure we don't get relegated. I'm going to put that.
I was going to say, keep in mind, it sort of crept up on me, but we are actually in the relegation zone.
Yes, correct, and we're 3 clear of the bottom, which is insane.
Yeah.
But I just think all of us have gotten so bored. And so I saw comments not on the Middlesbrough game, but the game prior, that people were saying that they were on their way to the stadium and then just decided not to go to the game. Jeez. Right? And I feel like that's the rhetoric that's going around the city at the moment. Like I was speaking to a Hull KR fan in Hull, and they were saying that, you don't even mention the football anymore. It's just, like, at the moment they're all just talking about rugby. So I've got a feeling that we just need someone to come in and lift our spirits again. And whether that's genuinely losing games 4-3, that's something that I wouldn't mind in the first kind of couple games, but I just want something exciting. And I think Ikanovich probably brings that more so than definitely Houghton. And I don't know the status with Robbins at the moment.
I think Robbins is an interesting one. Like, all this paper talk through Alan Nixon saying that he was interested in the job, but only if he didn't have to apply for it or interview for it. And we were saying before the episode, I don't know how much stock to put in that, because for me it's sort of ridiculous for someone in any walk of life to say, I don't want an interview, because as much as it's about selling yourself to the business, it's as much about the business selling themselves to you, because you want to know, in the case of a football manager, you want to know, what's my transfer budget, what's my squad, in terms of, is there any need to sell players? Like, what's the sort of situation with the squad? What's the ambition of the owner? What's the state of the training facilities? All those sorts of things. You're not just going to say, hey, if you offer me the job, I'll sign on the dotted line and then walk into the club completely blind like that. It's almost says to me that I think the story with Nixon's more about saying, put me on the short list and sort of rush through the process so that he's basically guaranteed the job.
Yeah, I think I said this. I wouldn't want someone just coming in not having done their due diligence. Because I don't think that's going to create any beneficial or supportive environment, right? Then you've got two parties not talking to each other and just assuming that, like, I don't see Adrian doing that either. I don't see him just picking a manager that's not wanting to understand kind of where the club wants to go and what the current status is. Because I'm sure that there's information that isn't public that Adrian would share in an interview, and to bypass that almost seems
negligent, really.
Negligent, but also kind of like immature.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want the job, or do you just want a job just so you can keep busy?
And that's right. And
that's what I want to avoid. I don't just want someone coming in for the sake of having a job. I want someone coming in that buys into the club and the city and actually wants to make a change, which is why I think, number one, I'll never understand the hate that Rosie got, ever, no matter who tries to explain it. But when you've got someone whose nan is from Hull, but also played for the club, it's not buying into being a manager. It's buying into the city. It's buying into the club and wanting to see that grow from a non-selfish perspective, right? A selfless perspective. And I think it would be nice to have that kind of spirit again in the next manager. And I get that from Dawson. So I hope he sticks around as assistant.
Yeah. The other name that we haven't talked about is Alex Neil, who I think is actually now either the favourite or has sort of shot up the betting odds.
He's been linked before.
Yeah, and so it's easy to forget, actually, because I sort of look at him and he's been around for a while, but it's one of those ones, I think, where you're judging the manager on their appearance, which is such a strange thing to do. But you look at him and he's middle-aged, bald guy. You're like, he just must play boring football, right? Like he's just
Yeah.
got that sort of look to him. And the clubs that he's managed, you look at, like it's Preston, it's Stoke, it's Sunderland. But he actually, so he got Norwich promoted to the Premier League, call it sort of 8-9 years ago. So it's a while ago now. But then he had Preston finishing 7th in the table while he was there, scoring close to 70 goals. Got Sunderland promoted from League One, obviously, which sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but a lot of managers failed to do that. And he basically walked in there, and I think he joined them in February, and they only lost one more game for the season under him. It failed at Stoke, but everyone's failed at Stoke. He's an interesting one where I wonder, he's one of those managers I feel like if you give him a budget, he could actually do something a bit interesting. So, there's also the puns for me with his name being very similar to mine. So there's part of me that's like, doesn't mind it for that perspective either. But he's sort of that dark horse for me where actually, like you said, like he's been mentioned a bit. He's sort of creeping up. Wouldn't shock me.
I think what he brings is just knowledge, and that's something that you can't put a price against it, no matter what the appearance is. He's a proven manager, especially at this level, and everyone's been screaming to bring someone in that's proven at a championship level that can do the job. Sure, he did the job a couple of years ago, but he's done the job.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be a bad appointment. I just don't know how much stock there is in it.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think at the moment everyone's guessing. So we'll see. Well, it remains to be seen. Like there could be an announcement today. It would be quite funny if we do try to make a play for John Eustace, given the fact that we are playing Blackburn this weekend. So whether that would delay any sort of play to after the game will be funny to see. But that might be a good segue to talk about Blackburn, managed by John Eustace, who have had terrific results in their last 2 games. They beat Borough and Leeds 2-0. So sort of, pretty good advertisement for his ability to, deploy that low block, sit back, play the counter attack when need be against these high scoring teams like Borough and Leeds, but can also mastermind, pretty decent results as well for Blackburn. So Blackburn sitting pretty decently in the table and doing pretty well under him.
Yeah, look, I think they've definitely taken a turn of fortune. They did lose 3 in a row. So they've turned that to win the next 3 and only concede 1 goal in those 3. So they're definitely, I'd say they're definitely in form. And I'm worried. Not worried, but I just think they might best us purely from a confidence perspective, because I think that's what we've got really going against us at the moment. Yeah,
and I think it's an interesting game. Well, there's a lot of unknown factors, so it's reasonably hard to preview this game because there's a lot. If there's a new manager in or not, it's an interesting game because it gives Dawson a good opportunity to play a team that's not hugely better than us. It's not like a Borough with their attacking talent. Like Blackburn, Cantwell and Ahashi are sort of their main attacking options, and they have, I don't think Ahashi scored in about 10 games. So you're looking at it as a good chance to get a point if we can defend well, if we can set up well. But it's also a good opportunity to sort of not necessarily get the win, but it's I guess it's a winnable game. Maybe you play around with the players a little bit. So like we were saying, whether you start Burstow up top, whether you tweak the formation a little bit more. I don't know. It's really hard because when you're sitting in the relegation zone, it's hard to say there's nothing to lose because you do need to start picking up points.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a game we just go and target a 0-0 draw and just get a point.
I think it's a game that we can at least be competitive in. I don't think I necessarily want to go out there and just park the bus for 90 minutes because I don't think that inspires any confidence, and it starts edging on the point of desperation, which I only see we hit in January. So I'd want to go out there. If I were thinking about changes, I'd start Burstow. I'd probably give Giles a crack to start with, and maybe bench Drame. Hughes comes back in, I'm assuming, for Maka, even though I should say I don't think Maka had a bad game. But Maka's always been like that. Maka knows that he can come in and just have a quality game.
Would you suggest then, like, it's interesting because if you could almost switch to a back three in that case with Hughes now back available.
Yeah, and play Giles as left wing.
Play Giles and Drame, even give Coyle a break.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
just we've got these wing backs. We're not really using them as wing backs. That's all.
I don't know how it looks benching our captain.
Yeah.
Look, there's so many permutations and combinations of what an V11 could look like, and I don't have an answer. But I would want to see Burstow start rather than Pedro.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. I think you'd like to think a manager will reward good form, will reward that goal and try and keep that positive momentum going. We hadn't scored in a number of games before Burstow got on the score sheet. So you'd think, you want to keep that positivity going, see if you can hit a hot streak, start to score a few more goals. So, seeing Burstow start would be good. Whether you put Longman and Kamara behind him, just trying to get balls into the box. Burstow's tall, and has a good header, like I was saying. Try and get on the end of a few of those crosses might be the way to go. I thought Omer was actually okay. Like, he's sort of drifted in and out of this season, but I
don't feel like he's got end product at the moment. And I know Mitch is going to disagree with me. But I just feel like he gets pushed off the ball really easily. And I feel like, at least in the last few matches, his first instinct is to turn back rather than take on defense. And there were glimpses of it in the Borough game. But I think it might be one of those situations where we're going to bench you, and just when you come on, prove to us that you've got that attacking intent and you actually can. I don't think he's got an assist this season. He scored the free kick in pre-season.
He got the assist in the League Cup, but nothing in the league.
Nothing in the league, right? So he hasn't scored or assisted in the league. And it's not saying he won't. It's just saying I think give someone else the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he's one of those players where if you're seeing him come on at 60 minutes, you kind of go, okay, it is a good sign of our depth. Him and Mellum, I thought Mellum actually looked pretty decent when he came on as well. Yeah. But it's hard to justify dropping, say, a Palmer for one of them. And they're all sort of competing for that same spot, really.
Yeah, and that's why I think Palmer has to start. And I think Palmer has to Palmer controlled that midfield really well. And was always looking forward, kept the ball really well. Like, he's a strong guy. He's not going to get pushed off it like Omer is going to. And like you said, there's no harm in bringing on Malem or Omer in the 60th minute or 65th, or if you're Walter in the 89th. And it just, bring that spark in and bring that energy in, I think is also as valuable as starting them from the beginning.
And to be fair, that was someone else that we haven't talked about. Bedia coming on at 75 minutes or 70 minutes, whatever it was, had that ball where someone, I can't remember who it was, played the ball up to him. He took the ball down great with the first touch, swiveled, beat a man, got through a bit of a press and got through the other side, dribbling the ball. And I was like, this is the Bedia we were seeing earlier in the season. Yeah. And it was just frustrating that he sort of clearly fell to the outer with Volta, where he was just coming on for sort of 5 or so minutes at the end of games. So
what I don't get is, like, I think Burstow and Bedia have shown their quality more so than Pedro. In my opinion,
agree.
Right? And I almost don't know the logic or the justification around starting Pedro every single game when Bedia and Burstow have both shown, especially in the last game, that they're as good to start as Pedro.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think I probably said before the Borough game I was really interested in that lineup, and I'm even more interested in how we line up against Blackburn now that we have this body of knowledge that Dawson now has. Because you're right, like, how you can justify Pedro getting another start over a Burstow or a Bedia will be really interesting to see. So it'll be a really interesting game, whether or not a manager's appointed in time for it. All signs point to that being the case. It might be the case that whoever it is just sat in the stand watching the game and Dawson still takes charge. But we'll see. What's your score prediction for this one?
I have consistently predicted us losing in the last 37 weeks. I'm going to go with a 2-1 win.
Wow. Okay. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I'm going to go change it around.
Change it around. Yeah, right. Scoring 2 goals is almost as shocking as the idea that we could win a football match.
Correct. So if we're going to win, we're going to do it in style.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we did beat them both games last season, so I think we've actually got a pretty decent record against them in general. So, maybe this is the game for it. I'm going a 0-0. I'm thinking if it is Dawson still in charge, I think Dawson would just sort of go, let's just try and get a clean sheet. Let's try and build something from the ground up. But hey, who knows? Yeah, if Burstow or someone starts and he can get on the end of one, it could change the whole complexion of the game, which would be quite interesting.
Have we had a clean sheet this season?
We had a 0-0 with Millwall.
That's right.
Is the only one. Yeah. Well, we should have had a penalty because
we should have had a lot this season. We haven't.
Yeah, can tally it all up at the end of the season and just see how bad it got. But look, thank you for joining me for this one, Mike.
All good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And we will be back next week for another episode. It's a particularly special episode. It is our 300th episode of the Tigers Down Under. So make sure that you join us for that one. And until then, come on, City.